Are you tired of overpaying for your gold, silver, and platinum bullion coins and bars? Then visit sdbullion.com today. SD Bullion was recently named the 177th fastest growing company in the United States by Inc. magazine. This is because they offer the absolute lowest prices in the industry and follow up with over-the-top customer service. So what are you waiting for? Go to sdbullion.com today and join more than 60,000 happy investors that save money on every precious metals purchase they make.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today it's a new month, October 2nd, 2017. Well, we started out the month literally with a bang, a really sad one. The situation in Vegas, 50 people at least killed, another 400 injured by a deranged sniper who is a recent convert to the religion of peace, Islam. Amazingly enough, what a shock. Well, anyway, here to talk about this and more is John Rubino, but first, email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Any questions, comments, etc. John, hey, I would say happy Monday, but it's anything else but.
Yeah, there's violence in the world, Kerry,
Yeah.
in a lot of different places. Vegas is the big one for the U.S. And this one looked like it was more of a, lone crazy, an older white guy with an automatic rifle. But Islamic State is claiming him. So we'll see how it plays out, whether it turns out to be an act of terrorism or an act of crazy. Not that it matters to the, the people involved in it.
Yeah,
terrible.
Obviously. Yeah. Obviously not, but we had other violence over the weekend. We had the referendum in Catalonia. If you're not familiar with Catalonia, Catalonia is a province, we would say, or a state of Spain. And they were seeking to have a referendum to basically declare their sovereignty. And unfortunately, the Spanish government, John, had other ideas.
Yeah. Well, Catalonia is a fairly rich part of Spain, and they don't feel like they've been well treated by the central government. They think they're giving more than they're getting in being part of Spain. And so they had a referendum. They decided to vote on whether they should stay within Spain or branch out on their own, become their own country. And, this was completely nonviolent. It was people polling themselves and deciding what they wanted to do. But the central government came in with cops, with rubber bullets and clubs and everything. And something like 200 or 300 people got hurt in the ensuing police violence. So we're seeing something really interesting happen now in Europe in particular, where you've got forces pulling the system apart and other forces pulling it together. For instance, the French president just recently came out with a blueprint for further European integration. In other words, he wants to try to create a United States of Europe in which the constituents of the European Union are bound more tightly and lose more sovereignty to the central government in Brussels, really in Germany, and in that way become something more like the U.S., where Tennessee and Mississippi and California are they're separate cultures and they have separate local governments, but they're still subject to the rules of the federal government. Now, they want to create something like that in Europe as a way of binding them together economically and supposedly making the system work better, because right now it's sort of this hybrid that doesn't really work very well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got technology making it possible for regions or really small entities otherwise to operate independently. Because, if your people are using Google for their search and Amazon.com for their shopping, it doesn't really matter if you're part of France or Spain or a separate country. You can cut free trade deals with your neighbors and then operate pretty much as you have in the past, but with sovereignty, with control of your borders to an extent.
Yeah.
And that's the battle going on now in Europe, where somebody like Catalonia can just say, listen, we want to take off and be a country of our own. And they can technically do it. Maybe the central government won't let them, but they're apparently going to try. And then you've got Eastern European countries like Poland and Hungary who would really like to control their borders. They want to decide how many new refugees come in each year. But the European Union central government is telling them, nope, as part of our organization, you have to let in the number of people that we decide, and you have to let in the types of people that we decide. And so there's that battle going on where, to a lot of members of the European Union, the whole Brexit thing is starting to seem more and more reasonable because it's more and more onerous to have to, obey bureaucrats in Brussels from the point of view of Hungary or Poland. So it's not clear, which of those forces win, and whether we end up with a completely integrated Europe a decade from now or a really atomized Europe where a lot of what are now regions or at least members of the EU have broken off on their own and become completely independent states. Interesting process at work.
Oh, yeah.
But one that is probably going to lead, as it works itself out, to more of the kinds of violence that we saw in Spain this weekend. So I don't know. It wouldn't be a surprise to see something like that also spread to the U.S., where there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the central government on the part of a lot of states, where you at least see things like nullification, which is a state telling the federal government that it's not going to obey the federal government's rules anymore. We're seeing that with, for instance, legalized marijuana in the U.S., where, that's still a Schedule I drug, according to the federal government. But a lot of states are just saying, nah, it's legal here. And with sanctuary cities, where, a city will decide that it doesn't want to abide by federal immigration law anymore. And that's going to be an interesting process, too, to see how it works out, because, it's if nothing else, it's illuminating the hypocrisy of both the right and the left, because each side is all for states' rights when it's their issue. Yeah. But it's violently opposed to states' rights when the states are disobeying the federal government on something they think the federal government should have power over. And it would be nice if everybody was just consistent and had a one opinion about the role of states versus the federal government's power, and applied it to every issue. But that's not how it works. We're just kind of politically opportunistic and hypocritical in the U.S. and everywhere else. It's human nature. But it's interesting to see a process come along that illuminates the hypocrisy. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing in the U.S. right now.
Well, look, in the EU, their Brussels has gone insane. They've got like hundreds of pages regulating bottled water, and they've outlawed the claim that water prevents dehydration. I mean, this kind of stuff is just madness. I mean, I think that water will help avoid dehydration, if you drink enough of it, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, they do seem to be going a little overboard on the whole regulation thing, and which isn't a surprise. I mean, this is basically a socialist bureaucracy they've set up there, where the guys in charge sincerely believe that they should control every aspect of their people's lives. And so they're taking steps, to make that happen. And that's one of the reasons why virtually no European economy is really firing on all cylinders. And, Germany is the apparent example or exception to that. They've got really low unemployment and fast growth and everything. But in a lot of ways, that's a mirage, because they're basically just doing vendor financing, where the German banks lend money to the other European countries who then buy German stuff, which gives Germany a nice trade surplus and fast growth. But at the cost of all that debt that they're taking on to Spain and Italy and Portugal, who will never pay them back. No. So to understand Germany's economy, you have to look at a true balance sheet, which is all the debt that is now owed by Italy, let's say, but that Germany really is going to have to make good on eventually. Yeah. So really no place in Europe is doing all that well. And a lot of that is because of the regulations that the EU imposes on each European country. So that, capitalism really isn't capitalism anymore, Kerry.
Hey,
and
that's so
because
true.
Of that, we have billions of people living in the world right now that are only there because we created enough wealth via relatively free markets in order to support them all. And that's going to change going forward in a lot of ways. We're bumping up against a lot of resource limitations. At the same time, governments are becoming less and less hospitable for the kind of capitalist creative destruction and free market dynamism that would maybe let us support all these people.
Well, and that comes down to an issue that is near and dear to every one of you out there, and that is employment. And unemployment in Europe is way higher than the U.S. And if you're looking to hire somebody, and you need to find the right talent for your business, but on short time, you don't have to get lost in a huge stack of resumes anymore. To find your perfect hire, you just need the right tools, smarter tools. And that means ZipRecruiter.com/Lutz. And with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards with just a click. So you can rest easy knowing your job is being seen by all the right candidates. ZipRecruiter puts its smart matching technology to work, actively notifying qualified candidates about your job within minutes of posting, so you receive the best possible matches. And that's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other hiring sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on the right candidates finding you. It finds them for you, and you can even get a head start on the interviewing process by adding screening questions to your job post to help identify the most qualified candidates, so you don't have to waste time sorting through a stack of resumes to find the perfect fit. And it's no wonder that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in 1 day or less. The easy-to-use ZipRecruiter dashboard lets you manage your hiring process from start to finish, all in one place. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. So find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by growing businesses of all sizes and industry to find qualified job candidates with near immediate results. And right now, you can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Lutz, ZipRecruiter.com/Lutz. It's the only place to go to fill your job vacancies. ZipRecruiter.com/Lutz. But seriously, John, getting back to it, I mean, all of this government interference in the economy, all of this intervention, what does it do? It really does lower standards of living. It makes it harder for you to find the job that you want to find. And it really helps kill the entrepreneurial class, which in the U.S., for the first time during the Obama administration, more companies were destroyed than were created. And that is really a bad thing for any country, but especially the U.S.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of reasons for that, and increasing regulation is one of them, clearly, especially in Europe, but also in the U.S. But another big one, and I'll come from the left for this one, Kerry, is the concentration in every sector. We've allowed a handful of big corporations to take over most of the major sectors out there. And even though we have antitrust laws on the books, which are designed to limit the size of and size and concentration of corporations in a given sector, it hasn't worked. So now we've got a handful of big banks running the banking sector. We've got a handful of media companies running all the mainstream media. Same thing in drugs, where big pharmaceutical companies are buying each other out. So just a handful of them basically control huge sections of the drug business. It goes on and on. Big
health insurance, big health insurance.
Yes. And so if you're an entrepreneur in one of those sectors, you face these gigantic oligopolies that are able to get regulations passed by buying the votes of politicians that are favorable for the big companies and really almost impossible to live with for small companies. At the farmers market here in the town I live in Idaho, you talk to the small farmers who come in there, and they all say the same thing, that they can't live under the new regulations that have been basically written by big food with the goal of putting small farmers out of business. It's true in a lot of other sectors as well. And that's in part why we don't have a lot of really dynamic or as many dynamic entrepreneurial small companies operating as we used to. And unless that changes, it's highly unlikely that we're going to get a lot of, new generations of entrepreneurs coming along who actually make a huge difference in the world. But that would actually be a pretty good political platform. If you wanted to run on an antitrust platform, now would be the best time to do it since the 1930s. which is the last time we had any really serious antitrust legislation be put in place. Because you could run against big corporations and point out that, it's impossible to be an entrepreneur in today's world because these big guys control every aspect of all the major markets. And I think you'd have a chance of at least generating a lot of votes from small business, which is a pretty good part of the economy that cuts across political definitions. There are a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans, a lot of independents who run businesses, and all of them probably would respond to something like that. So maybe we'll see somebody come along and do that.
Yeah, well, that would be a good thing. It's time. Look, I would say, like, if we had real competition in the country and we had real capitalism, we had free markets, then if one company got a little too powerful, it wouldn't make any difference over the long run. But we have this kleptocracy, and in the kleptocracy, the powers that be in government actually aid these companies to get bigger because, look, the government loves only having 3 companies to regulate instead of 300 or 3,000. That way they get 3 checks every week or every quarter, whatever it is, and their job becomes much easier. Not that they regulate. It's really an uneasy partnership between government and industry or business that's really disserves the people. I mean, why do we need 7 companies dominating the media? And they'd like to make it 6 with AT&T or Comcast rather acquiring Time Warner. I mean, how is that going to help you and me here, John? How does that help you out there having less major sources to turn to? The only good thing here is getting back to my story that I wrote, to my article, is that the media is dying, the legacy media. So this is really more a survival aspect, a survival effort for them to endure than anything else.
Yeah. Some of this is self-correcting. If people get so disgusted with the oligopoly that's in charge of a given industry, they go outside it. But the fact that we've got, like you said, 6 and maybe soon 5 big companies controlling 90% of the mainstream media is still a really bad thing, even if there's a little bit of pressure from people going outside the media. They still control most of it. And there's no benefit to the average person to have this happen. But like you said, governments like that. They like dealing with just a few big companies that are basically their peers. And the regulators love it because then, a job regulating big media or big pharma or the big banks, that's basically an extended job interview in which you prove that you can be a good team player to the companies you're regulating, and then they hire you away eventually for 5 times your government salary. So it works really well for the political class and for the big companies, and not so well for everybody else. It wasn't that long ago that we had rules in the U.S. limiting, for instance, the number of radio stations or TV stations that one entity was allowed to own. Well, we got rid of those rules, and now you can basically own as much media as you can afford to buy. It used to be that banks were allowed to be either a deposit-taking institution or an investment bank that takes risks with shareholders' money. We got rid of those rules. Now banks can be both, and which means they can grow to absolutely insane sizes. The JP Morgan Chase is in a lot of ways a big hedge fund, but it's also one of the biggest mortgage lenders and biggest deposit takers in the country. So those kinds of entities become so big that they're completely uncontrollable by the government. There's no way that the government can tell JP Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs what to do, because in a lot of cases, the guys in the government that are trying to tell them what to do are former executives from those companies, So it can't be done at this point. The only way to clear this out is for a political movement to come along that focuses on trust busting, as the term used to be used back in the 1930s, where we go in and we just make arbitrary limits on how big a company can get in a given field, and accept that the companies are going to whine because the limits are arbitrary. But that's not the point. The point is that we want to avoid the kinds of pathologies that come from concentration. And if we lose a little bit of economy of scale from that, so be it. It's a small price to pay for having dynamic competition in all these big industries that are now so sclerotic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the worst thing that's happened to the country is this concentration. Because once you have the concentrated power, then the government officials, elected officials, whatever, they're all currying favor with these media entities to get favorable coverage. You know, the fact is Trump was quite a bit of an anomaly in that regard because, he just blew the old paradigm to bits. But the fact is that, the concentration and the alliance, you could argue that these banks are really just a branch office of the government, They really don't have an independent.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, I don't know which. I keep trying to figure out which is which, but I just don't know. But really, it's terrible for the country. It's terrible for you and I as consumers. I mean, look at the choices you used to have in so many areas. Now you have more choices, but they're all put out by the same three oligopolistic entities in each industry, right? I mean, there's no competition left here.
Yeah, and you don't even know whether what you're buying is from a small company or a big company, because the big companies buy up the small companies, but keep the labels of the small companies. That's especially true in food, where, go to the grocery store and pick out some, little organic hippie yogurt that you used to, or that you've bought for years. And then you look at the bottom of the container and it's owned by General Mills or something like that. It's not even clear. Or with beer, same thing, go to a bar and think you're buying a microbrew. Well, you're actually buying something from Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
It's
totally.
gotten that crazy.
Yeah, they do. It's real deceptive, and you have to look at the thing closely, examine the label to know that beer, that craft brewed beer, supposedly is not really a microbrew, and it's just so deceptive.
Name the product. The toothpaste, Tom's of Maine toothpaste. My wife has been buying.
Doesn't Tom own that? I thought Tom in Maine produced that, but what is it, Colgate or Crest now that owns it?
Or Procter & Gamble or Colgate. Yeah, one of those guys owns it. Yeah, it just goes on and on. Burt's Bees, which I have a thing of Burt's Bees.
Yeah, I love Burt's Bees, but Bert isn't running it?
Yeah.
Bert doesn't run the show anymore?
Nope, Bert's not running the show anymore. Well, the vice president in charge of that division for Procter & Gamble or somebody is in charge of Burt's Bees.
Yeah, there's a product manager in charge now of Burt's. It's unbelievable. And you know what happens also, like potato chips, real simple thing, like freaking potato chips, John, which are not as good as they used to be when we were kids. They're just not. I don't know if the oil they're using is different or they're using crummier potatoes, but every time an independent comes up that makes a really good potato chip, you know what happens? Like Cape Cod potato chips. They made these brown russet potato chips that I loved. They were out of this world. What happens? Wise, whoever owns Wise, or Frito-Lay, which I think is PepsiCo, buys them out. And then they put their own label on it, and they aren't as good, amazingly enough. They're just not nearly as good. And we see this in industry after industry after industry. It keeps on happening, and tired of it. But anyway, we're not going to solve the world's problems today, but you can find out more by going to John's site, dollarcollapse.com. Our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for the newsletters. There's material in there you just can't find anywhere else. The Twitter feed is @KerryLutz. The Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. John, we will catch up with you next week, same time, same place.
Thanks, Kerry. See ya.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.